Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Heart of New York show. I tell you, I am so excited because I got my good friend, Reverend Doug Heilman, back, the author of one of the most fascinating books you could ever read. It's called Being Dad. Being Dad. I mean, there's so much in this book, it will blow your mind as a minister, as a man, what this man has accomplished with gang members in Brooklyn and probably throughout the city. Welcome back, brother.
Thank you.
Welcome back. It's good to have you back. How you been? Okay?
Good.
You look good. You look good. For the people that are just tuning in that haven't seen the previous shows yet, can you just tell them a little bit about yourself, how you got, how it leads up, right from the beginning, how it leads up into the book of
Sure.
Being Dad?
Well, to start off, I was a farm boy from Montana. And by numerous events in my life, I ended up being the youth pastor of a Norwegian church in Brooklyn. And one night, 40 gang members decided to go to my church. And as I like to say, my blonde, blue-eyed kids turned even more pale than they normally were. And that was the beginning of an adventure that's lasted almost 50 years now.
Incredible. So right there, you're doing a service, and these guys walk in, and where'd they go? Right to the front row?
Well, yeah, as any typical church, the empty seats are always in the front row. So that's where they headed, and dressed in their full gang regalia, where they have flying their colors, chain around the waist, boots, big hats with the bandanas flying from it. It was a new event for me.
Like right out of the movies.
Yes.
Right
yes.
out of the movie. So what happened after that? Did you say, hey, welcome, sit down, have a cup of
Well,
coffee?
yeah, I thought this would be a one-time event. So I said, well, I don't know what I had planned for that night, but I didn't do it. I just made a very simple gospel presentation. And they kind of listened among the shoving and the wrestling, and my kids kind of staring at them in awe. And afterwards, I said, my blonde Norwegian kids, they mingled and got to talk to them a little bit. And
They did, huh?
Yeah, they were very good. They were excellent.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that night, man, that was quite an event. That'll probably never happen again.
And then what?
The next week they came back.
They came back.
Yes, and they kept coming back. And the parents of my kids weren't quite as excited about it as the kids were. And one night, even a police officer came by, and he wanted to know if he wanted me to stand at the door and keep them out because they were a dangerous street gang. And I said, no, they're coming to Bible study. And he walked away a little bewildered by that. But after 6 weeks, they were becoming very much a part of my life. And during the day, I go out and see them where they're at in their neighborhood. But it was becoming a conflict because my church family was very concerned about my safety and their own kids' safety. So one night I got both groups were there, my Lutheran League kids and my gang kids. And I said, tonight we're going to do something different. We're all going to pray for me because I don't know what God wants me to do. And I want you to all join hands. I want you to pray that God will give me direction. Whether I stay in a church or I go out on the street, it's up to him. So one of the guys with a big afro raised his hand, can I pray first? And his prayer was, Dear Lord, we know where he belongs. Tell him.
Oh.
And that was the decisive moment in my life where I decided that I was going to do exactly that.
So a street ministry going out and to the gang members. So how did that do? What you just show up at that door or the location?
My rationale was that if I was going to make a mistake, and I decided I can't deal with it and stayed in the church, and a year later go checking on them and they were dead or in jail, I couldn't change that. But if I went on the street with them and a year later I said I can't handle this, I could always go back to the middle class white neighborhood church if that's what I chose to do. So if I'm going to make a mistake, I decided to make it on their behalf. And during this time, I got to know some of the kids. But there were 17 active gangs. The one that came to my church was one gang. And I didn't realize it, but they were bragging that they had their own pastor, and for the rest of them not to mess with me, which actually put a target on my back. So it was actually an event recorded in the book where another gang came to where we were having actually a Bible study, and they started shooting, but they got the wrong apartment. So I decided that I had to expand my horizons, and I actually went to the doors of where the leaders of the gangs, the other gangs, and introduced myself and scared the daylights out of them. And that was how I became involved with all of them, because I couldn't just belong to one group,
Right.
because then
right.
that was dangerous.
So then what happened right after that? How did you live?
I moved into a small apartment, very reasonable rent. I had some savings, but other than that, I really didn't have any income at all.
So you were counting on people with donations?
I didn't ask anybody for anything. If the Lord's put me out here, then it's His responsibility. And
That is amazing.
It wasn't amazing at the moment. It was just natural.
Sounds like George Mueller.
If the Lord, that was His responsibility.
That's right. That's
And,
right.
my Norwegian families were absolutely terrific. They made sure I ate.
I was just going to say, did you miss a meal?
I missed a few, but Sundays were good because I would get invited. But they were very supportive.
So you're out ministering to the people. Your ministry is growing. And then you did what?
Well, when I went to the kid's house, I said, I want to help. Whatever I can do, I want to help. And I discovered that one area that was particularly difficult for them was going to court. They all had court cases. And with their mother at home with other kids, they had nobody go with them. And going to court was a scary event. You had to be there at 9. You could stay there till 3 until they called your case. They didn't have money to eat. So going to court with them was the first real development of trust. That if I would do that, then that was pretty special.
So you went with with your kids to court
Several times a week.
several times a week, just to comfort them or help them? Or
Yes, at that point I had no real impact in the court system. I just was there with them.
Did you tell the judge, like, I'm here to help also, or did you?
You don't always get that opportunity.
Okay, all right.
But as I got more visible in the court system, then that became a real situation.
So they got to know you.
They got to know me.
But what were some of the cases? Was it armed robbery? Was it murder? What?
It was several homicide cases,
Homicide.
Robberies. So it ran the gamut of pretty much everything.
And you still didn't know how you were going to have lunch because you had no money.
No, and at this point I had to buy lunch for 2.
You had what?
I had to buy lunch for 2.
Right, the
Because
person that's going to court with
right,
you.
because they usually weren't able to eat because they didn't have any money.
You talk about walking in faith. I'm telling you, brother. And you did it. And I don't think you even worried about it.
I never did. There are 2 things that I think I look back and I marvel at. I never worried about anything, and I was never, ever afraid. I wasn't afraid of them because they were kids who had an outlandish fashion style, but I wasn't afraid of them.
You wasn't afraid of gangsters, gang members that he had to go to court with, not afraid of, well, how am I going to pay my rent? I'm not asking anybody for money. Not afraid of, well, now I have 2 to feed for lunch when I go to court. Not afraid of all these things. Can you imagine? Where does something like that come from? That only comes from above, ladies and gentlemen. Only comes from above. The only way that this could ever happen is divine by the power of God, nothing else. You have everybody else out there trying to raise money and this and that, yet you walk out in faith, didn't ask for anything, and you believe God for the calling that you had in your life.
Well, I think it's interesting looking back again. Growing up in Montana, I didn't come to New York with any prejudice. I had no preconceived ideas of who was bad and who was dangerous and whatever. I didn't have that. They were just kids to me, and I didn't come with any notions of what I thought they should have been.
Right.
They were just bratty kids.
Bratty kids, nothing like they could slit your throat at any minute. So, what came next? Is this when you said, I need a location, a place for these guys?
Well, from, I guess, probably the second or third month after I left the church, Juan, crazy kid was his name. He was the warlord of the homicides.
Juan?
Juan. He was one of 13 kids.
Wow.
And it was a situation where nobody had a room or a bed. You just took whatever space was available. And so 1 o'clock in the morning, Juan would come by, ring my doorbell. There's no place in my house to sleep. And so, can I sleep on your floor? And I had a one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't that big.
And this is at 1 o'clock in the morning?
Oh, yeah. Well, they got up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they went to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. And eventually he just kind of moved in without me realizing what had happened. And from there on out, I haven't lived alone. I didn't live alone for all those years.
Isn't that something? And then it grew into something bigger and bigger,
Well,
right?
the landlord where I lived, as a 6-family house, came to me and they said, we're selling the house. My son's been mugged a number of times. We want to get out of here. We're selling the house he had bought it for $21,000 and he offered it for $20,000. So at that time, I had people who said, "Hey, we'll help you and we'll buy the house," and that's what happened.
$20,000.
Which they then was eventually sold later for over $1 million.
Oh my goodness.
So that became Discipleship House, and it was fully rented. So we took the rent money each month and did the renovations as we had vacancies.
And so what went on in there? Housing and what else?
Eventually, when we had the full occupancy of the house, we had the 12 to 15 kids living in the house. We decided a lot of these kids had educational issues, so we started a tutoring program in the basement. Later on, with the drug issue, we developed a drug program. That started and took over one of the bedrooms on the second floor. And then when the AIDS program started, we started that in the house as well.
Okay. And they lived there, right?
12 kids lived there.
12 kids lived there. And so they got their 3 meals a day there? You had to cook and everything? How'd that work?
Steve and Sarah were house parents, and they did the cooking.
Okay.
And one of the guys, his mother that was here last time, his mother had like 9 kids, and she loved to come to our house because it was peaceful and she was appreciated.
It was peaceful.
And she would
You
cook,
got gang members in there, and it's peaceful.
but some of them were her kids.
Uh-huh.
So she would come up and cook and then go home. So she did that once a week. But Steve and Sarah did most of the cooking.
That is wonderful.
But what happened was that we had the school in the basement. And so they would start school about 6 o'clock, and they knew that supper was at 6:30. And so we would sit down to eat dinner at night, and there'd be 15 kids sitting in the living room kind of looking at us, with longing. And so it ended up that we'd invite them. It got to the point we would be feeding 20, 25 people a night.
Oh, wow.
We had a table that would fold out to be 16 feet long, and whoever was in the house would end up eating. So that became a problem because the word got out.
Oh, okay.
So we had to change the hours of the school and sort of limit who came in at that particular time. But we learned a lot of things by just experience.
What's the most you ever learned?
These are kids who just needed somebody to know that they were alive and cared. I had a guy who was in Elmira prison, and he said, can you send me something every month? A book, it doesn't matter, because that way they know that I have somebody on the outside that cares about me. And this he's talking about the administration and the correction facility people. He said, I don't want them to ever think that nobody cares about me in here. So it's simply being being loved and being yelled at and being cared for and praised. It was all a package.
You know, one thing I picked up last time is when we had some of your kids on, because you adopted these. You,
Legally,
some of them.
Some of them.
Some of them you adopted, and that's why they call you dad.
Well, that's not the reason they call me dad.
What's the reason they call you
The
dad?
adoption was simply or legal guardianship in some cases, because
Okay.
if they were living in the house, I need a legal right to go to the school and
Right.
advocate for them. Or if they got hurt or whatever, I need the legal right to go to the hospital and advocate for them.
Okay.
So the legal guardianship or the adoption was basically to give me the legal right of a minor to be his parent.
Okay.
The being dad was that I was there, and I was the most consistent male in their lives. Me and him had several stepfathers, were abused. In fact, one of the stories in the book, Joey talked about how his stepfather abused him, would make him kneel on a cheese grater for hours at a time as a punishment. So I was the only positive person. And being a 30-some-year-old white male in a Hispanic culture was iffy.
Mm-hmm.
So for them to come up and say, I love you, or to give me a hug or whatever, being dad justified that. It legitimized it.
They all called you dad?
Most of them.
Wow.
Because that relationship legitimized that emotional connection. And we don't always understand that from looking back, but within that culture, that was important, that they could claim that relationship. And my commitment was always, well, that's a lifetime commitment. It's not like being a parole officer. It's a lifetime commitment.
Right.
And as 40, 50 years later, they're still in my life.
Right. Wow. That's something, brother. That's something. When we had some of your kids on the show previously, there's one thing that really stuck to me, because I try and use that when I'm reaching out to someone who's reaching out, is they said, you listened and you cared. You listened and you cared. You just didn't say, all right, sit down. I want you to open the Bible, and I'm going to preach to you now. You didn't really, as they would say, shove it down their throats. You really listened, and knowing you, you really listened, and I know with all my heart, because I've known you for decades now, you cared about these guys. You cared about them, and I think that's when we see the work of God so obviously manifest in the lives here of these kids, on how their lives have been completely turned around. It's just mind-boggling. I mean, when for people who've known the show Welcome Back, Carter, when you see all those kids sitting in the class and all that, it wasn't even like that. But these guys were out on the street. These guys were rough. They were rough. I mean, how many funerals? God knows how many funerals you've been to. So, with all these stories that you've had over these decades, and it must be amazing, is this what led you to start to listen? I got to do this. I got to get this on paper. Being dad, I have to tell this story because no one else will. How did this start?
Well, my story is vaguely interesting at best, but
I think it's fascinating, brother. You're an example of a man of great faith.
I don't see myself that.
Don't.
I don't see myself that way.
You are.
But my concern was that their stories are no longer being told by them. They've moved on. They're still relevant in part of their life, but they don't share. They're even the kids who've read the stories say, "Wow, I didn't know my mother was that. I didn't know my dad did that." And my goal was to have them share their own experience. I only had one criteria: you say what the Lord has done for you, not what you did for the devil, because
What a beautiful saying. You mind if I use that?
Nope.
Oh, thank you. That
We
is
would-
a great saying.
we would go out and give testimony to churches.
Right.
And they would get up, and I'm a gangster, and I just, whoa, back off. I'd always sit on the stage with them. I didn't trust them, what they're going to say. So I'd sit on the stage with them, and I'd pull their coattail like, okay, no, this is what the Lord has done for you, not
Right.
what you've done in the past.
Right.
But the stories in the book are where they came from and what motivated the change to go a different direction. And as you read, one of them is a police officer.
Right.
Or
Detective.
detective. Another one, it teaches in the police academy. Yolanda, who couldn't make that day, has been in the Army for 26 years.
Wow.
Joey was in the
Wow.
Army. And these are kids, Joey was the one whose father made him deal on a cheese grate.
Oh.
But their lives turned around, but they don't talk about it. And I said, we need to write this down for your kids' sake,
Right.
that your kids can say, wow,
Right.
look what my dad went through and look how he's raised me. And one of my biggest moments in my heart is when the guys will tell me that I raised my kids differently because how you raised me. And that's the greatest
Oh, boy.
praise you can possibly get.
Oh, my goodness.
But
sure.
my goal was here are 18 people out of a lot more who could have written their stories, now who all want to, of course. That, it brings hope. If you've never lived that life, this is how, wow, this is foreign to me, but it shows the Lord is working in ways that I don't see. For those who have lived a life similar, saying, wow, I can get out of this. I can change. I can become productive and happy and have a sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's where these guys and girls are now. They're adults now. Now some are grandparents.
Sure.
But that's what I wanted to share, is that it's not my story. My story is kind of the glue that holds it together. But these are the real heroes who came from this and then came out of it to become missionaries. I've had kids travel all over the world. One of my kids, he calls himself Herb in the book, went to Mexico as a missionary. Teddy's been to China. Eddie's been to South America. And these are kids from the street who are gangsters who became worldwide missionaries.
Is that
That's got to be
something?
told.
Is that something?
That's got to be shared. And again, my story is not the relevant one. It's what the Lord has done in their lives. And that's why my problem, I don't know how to market the book, but that's what I want to get out there. These are 19 or 18 stories that completely demonstrate that nobody is out of reach of God's love.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Another interesting part about this book, you got to get it. This is, one of the most fascinating things, because you would think that Doug wrote it, but these kids in here, they wrote their own story.
Yep. I didn't clean up I took some of the words out, but
All right.
I didn't change the grammar. I didn't change anything of context. And then what I did was that they wrote it, and then something was kind of gory. So I went back and said, can you modify that?
Right.
But they did it.
They did.
I didn't do it.
But do you think that might have been good in a way, maybe?
No, it was a little graphic.
A little graphic?
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I didn't want people to read it for the things they did for the devil, but to
I'm telling you, that is a
show
good
what
point.
the Lord has done in their life.
Don't show what you did for the devil. Show what the Lord has done in your life.
So I didn't edit. If the language is rough, it's because that's how they wrote it.
That's how they wrote it.
Now, I had a few who wrote it, their stories, and then at the end says, "I can't do it. It's too personal. I can't do it."
No kidding.
And we pulled it
Wow.
because that's
They
always
can't do it because it was too
It
hurtful
was too hurtful. It was too painful.
to bring it up. I would think that this would be one of the most therapeutic things they could do is write it down.
The writing was therapeutic.
Right.
In fact, PJ in the book, excuse me, he said, Pop, I can't do this. I can't do this. So we sat down one night and we taped it and I typed it up the next day. And then he calls me around noon and says, Pop, I went home and I wrote 48 pages because it became such a therapeutic thing that he couldn't stop writing.
Yeah, sure.
But some of the stuff he wrote, I couldn't put in the book. But It was therapeutic, but in some cases,
Mm.
they didn't want to share things that would impact on their families today.
Mm.
One of the girls shared a great deal about her father and things that happened to her life. And now he's much older. He has cancer. She said, I don't want to share that.
Mm.
I can't do that now. So we pulled it.
Mm.
But she still wrote it, and she still got the benefit of the writing because it did help her deal with it.
If someone out there is watching this now and they're in a gang and they're just reaching out, what tell them what they should do. If someone right now reading, watching the program, and saying, "Oh my goodness, this is something I got to get hold." What would you tell them to do now?
If they want to get out of
Yeah.
find somebody who listen. Find a church, a youth group, or something.
Any
or
recommendations?
not offhand at this
Not-
point. I've
okay.
been out of the field for a long time.
Yeah, right.
But there are people out there who want to listen. But you got to make the approach. My philosophy is always be the action, not the reaction.
Be the action, not the reaction.
And so if you have to find somebody, you go find them. Don't wait
Right.
for somebody to find you.
Right. Okay. I like that. And then that makes it more sincere on their part that they're willing to get help and do it. I'm telling you, I'm blown away by this because, like I said earlier, I known Doug for decades. Okay, and there were times when he would be there when I needed to talk also, and what he has done through his life has been nothing less but incredible. You talk about a man of faith that took that step and totally relied on God, the Lord, for everything, and he was never let down by that. He'll give you peace no matter what you're going through. No matter what you're going through. I'm telling you, get this book, Being Dad, by Doug Heilman, Reverend Doug Heilman. You will not disappoint, no matter who you are. Thank you for watching. God bless you. We'll see you next time.